Today's speaker, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Carolyn Liebler. She joins us from University of Minnesota, where she's Associate Professor of Sociology, a member of the Minnesota Population Center, and a faculty affiliate of the Institute for Social Research and Data Innovation. Her research focuses on the intersection of population studies and the social construction of race, with a special emphasis on how data on Indigenous peoples and tribal nations can be interpreted and used in a good way. Her publications have had a significant influence on how social scientists think about multiple heritage identities and fluidity in racial identity. Her contributions to the US data infrastructure have created new capacity for studying these topics, and she's a role model for engaged participatory research with tribal nations. Some of her major contributions to demographic research include calculating and incorporating individual level race response change within censuses, creating a homelands indicator variable for population analysis in tribal areas, and modeling the race categories for the IFOM's American Community Survey, the Survey and Decennial Census data sets from 2000 to 2019. She served as an expert demographer for tribes, the US Census Bureau, the National Academy of Sciences, and USDA WIC. Through her consulting business, Peak Insight, she works directly with tribal leaders to estimate future enrolled populations under varying. So I think we'll hear a lot of them. Thank you very much for joining us, Carolyn.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming today. I really appreciate the invitation and the chance to talk to a new set of people. I am going to be talking about the future American Indian population, but I'm going to be starting with some of the complexity and some of the past, because a lot of us are not schooled on American Indian population. I personally did not get very much, maybe the tiniest bit of American Indian history in my schooling, but until I was in graduate school and I really leaned into the topic, no one was talking to me about this thing. So I'm going to start. I have 5 topics. First, I want to just focus on the theoretical question of who should be included in a count of American Indian and Alaska Native people. I abbreviate this on my slides to AIAN. That's American Indian and Alaska Native. And sometimes in my words, I will abbreviate to American Indian or Native, but anyway, that's all, I'm all referring to the same group. Then I'll tell you about past American Indian and Alaska Native population growth, point out some complexities in the data that we have for this population. I'll show you the most recent Census Bureau projections for American Indians and Alaska Natives, and talk just briefly about why they completely fail. And then I'll show you some projections that I've made where I've tried to develop a new method to take response change into account and complexity to account more generally. So who should be included in a count of American Indian people? This is actually a philosophical question, and it has a variety of valid answers. So one answer would be to use the federal definition of American Indian Alaska Native, which is a person having origins in any of the original peoples of North and South America, including Central America, who maintains tribal affiliation or community attachment. I made this chart for one of the papers that I wrote, that it's just showing a variety of different ways that you could be American Indian. So in the federal definition, it's really focused on you have American Indian ancestors and you have tribal affiliation or community attachment. But note that in this definition, in the federal definition where they laid this out, this is 1997, which is the current definition, they did not say any other group has to have affiliation or community attachment. So if you're Asian, you can just be Asian. You don't have to be affiliated with Asian. Okay. Another way that you could identify American Indian and Alaska Native is through self-identification. You could say that an American Indian or Alaska Native person is a person who reports being American Indian or Alaska Native, with the right to change responses because it's self-identification. And that's actually built into the federal definition that we have to prioritize self-identification. If someone self-identifies one way and then an outsider says, no, we think you're this other thing, then the self-identification wins, according to the federal. So that's this set of circles, which you may notice are different than the other. And you know, this is an issue because it's self-monitored. So whatever a person says, you know, probably they're saying something based in reality, but not necessarily. You know, it's really emphasizing the social constructedness of race. And a third way is to focus on tribal citizenship. American Indian, you could say that a person who's American Indian, Alaska Native is those people who are enrolled citizens of federally recognized tribal nations. And this is a focus on nation and not race. And that's a whole separate thing. And so when the Supreme Court says we can't do affirmative action based on race, well, this isn't race, this is nation. And this is a political status. So this is kind of similar to the federal definition where you're affiliated with the tribe, but and also enrolled in the tribe. But this is a very restrictive definition, and that's one reason I don't focus on it is because there are no data. That's key for a demographer. But also, it's pretty restrictive, and it leaves out people that could very arguably be considered American Indian. For example, if you're missing family tree information, you've got to trace your ancestry back to a person on a roll. That roll that was a list of people from collected often 1870 to 1910-ish period where being American Indian and getting onto a federal list, like that was a difficult. You've had hundreds of years of wars. Like, why would you want to get on their list? You know, so some ancestors avoided being on the list. And then there's the issue of tracing your family heritage to that ancestor. There's also the issue that you could be entirely Native, but your ancestors are from so many different tribal groups that you don't qualify in any particular tribal group. And then also this depending on the federal government to recognize the tribe as a tribe, which they have, you know, there's lots of state recognized tribes. There's other tribes that aren't, that haven't made it through the federal recognition. So you're sort of leaving out quite a few people. So none of these definitions are perfect. I just wanted to lay that out that I'm an expert in census data. Oops, touched my microphone. And so census data don't ask if you're a tribal citizen. They ask what's your tribal affiliation, but the citizenship is not required. So let's look at American Indian population growth past. 1890 was the first year that the federal government tried to collect data to include all American Indians in the census. That was also the same year as the Wounded Knee Massacre. It was the end of a long period of very active wars. And it was during kind of the ramp up of, I don't know, we're hearing more about forced boarding schools. There were lots of forced assimilation programs, such as boarding schools. Another issue that was keeping this count low is that the enumerator would decide your race. So people were hired by the Census Bureau, they'd go around, they'd look at you, and they would decide your race. And they hardly ever said someone was American Indian if they weren't living on tribal lands. They just didn't see them as American Indian. So that would artificially reduce the population. Tribes were limited in their sovereignty, so they couldn't really push for inclusion. Racism was, of course, terrible. Also, Alaska was not part of the Union, so this was only American Indian, not Alaska Native. Central and South Americans were not included in any definition. And overall, the average annual growth rate was 0.7% over this period, 1890 to 1950. You can see it's quite a low slope. Here we have, more recently, you can see that the story has changed. Assimilation programs faded, these really violent forced assimilation programs. There's still lots of focus on assimilation, but self-identification became allowed for most of the country starting in 1960. They stopped using enumerators for most of the country. They still use enumerators even now on many very rural reservations, but people who were previously unidentified, like living in cities, could self-identify. Alaska became part of the Union in 1959, so the Unions are included. Things like self-determination, tribal sovereignty, the American Indian movement, and Native pride all increased people's willingness to claim their Native heritage that was previously they were treated so badly that they like, for example, boarding schools were so violent that a lot of people who were forced to go to boarding schools didn't want their children and grandchildren to identify as Native. But now that when you have these social movements and a whole different social scene, people were willing to go against grandma's wishes and say, you know what, I am. So here I am. Also, as of 2000, we've got the changing definition to include Indigenous Central and South Americans, which dramatically increased the Hispanic American Indian population. And overall, the average annual growth rate in this period was 4.6%. Totally different kind of period, as you can see. So the 2020 census counted 9.7 million. So not all of this increase is just summarizing. Not all of this increase is from births and migration, right? The count consistently exceeded expectations every single census. Every census we had an era of closure was what demographers call it. And the sociologists are like, well, it's a social construction of race. So this is where I'm really interested in the overlap between demography and the social construction of race. We had this demographic expectations and they were blown out of the water again and again and again. So some of the complexities that we see in some of the population growth, we can also see in other aspects of data about American Indians. I'll just talk briefly about census race versus ancestry. Many people don't report a tribe, which I've done research on, but I didn't hear because I wanted to make sure I finish on time. And then race response change is a big issue that is, let's talk about. So from 1980 to 2010, in the census long form, they had an ancestry question and a race question. They took away where were your parents born and they put in this ancestry question you can see here. That was pretty much the same for this whole period. What is this person's ancestry? I think in the end they said ancestry or ethnic origin. But we had, and this was the race question was like number 5 and the ancestry was number 30 or something. So it's way farther down. And a lot of people report American Indian ancestry, but not American Indian race. Some people report American Indian race, but not American Indian ancestry. So that's a thing, but it is a fill in the blank and it's question 30. So here's what happens when you look at so we've had this population increase. This is the same line I just showed you, but now it's bars. And this you can tell a slightly different color where this is the multiple race population that we're starting to count. You think, oh, the multiple race population, that's, how can you increase by this much? But then we have all these people, American Indian ancestry, but not race. It's actually 14.5 million total in 10, if you count the end. These are people who wrote down American Indian on somewhere. So that's a big population of additional people who know of it, are connected enough to write it down and potentially part of the future population. So then in 2020, the Census Bureau, their infinite wisdom, I used to really be a fan, and now I'm just like, no, it's falling apart. So they killed the ancestry question, they put it inside the race question. Terrible idea for American Indians. They're different. I've done analyses comparing like the red bar people to the blue bar people. They're very different kinds of people. So they put the ancestry question inside the race question, and then they announced in a blog post, because they no longer do technical documentation, they only do blog posts, that if someone wrote a tribal name, they put Cherokee in anywhere, like if they said I'm white, they mark the white box, I'm English, Irish, Scotch, Dutch, Cherokee. This is an online form they could keep writing. Then they would be coded by the Census Bureau as white and American, because they had reported a tribe. But that's also, that it used to be that those people would be coded in the ancestry. So that's some of the growth between 2010 and 2020. But we don't know how much, because they haven't, all they did was write one blog post to tell us that they haven't done any white papers, they haven't told us anything. Yeah. So another complexity is that race is much more complicated than the race question. Race question is super simplistic and it's only asked at one point in time, but as we know from living in the world and talking to each other, racial identity is a very complicated thing. So here, this is 2 papers that I wrote collaboratively with people who work at the Census Bureau, and published in Demography if you're looking for them. So this is a table from one of those papers that kind of shows what I'm talking about in terms of response change. So we have this data set of 161 million people. This is unweighted case count. Linked data, so it's not nationally representative, but it is half the nation. And this is everybody in the linked data who said that they are non-Hispanic, single race, white, Black, American Indian, or a combination of those in either 2000 or 2010. So we're just looking at American Indian. 723,000 reported it both times as non-Hispanic single race. But then you look at adding it up. So 1.04 in 2000 and 1.04 in 2010 said single race American Indian. Non-Hispanic. They're different people, what I'm trying to say. And it's not just, so that was amazing to see actually, because it seems like it's true when you look at the data, but we never really had evidence before. And what we found was that, oh, you can't really see the outlines, but here's the American Indian bar. Here's that 53% reported it in both censuses, and then we had these other people who either came or left the population. But I wanted to show this whole thing because this shows you that it's not just American Indian. This is certainly all multiple race groups. These are the multiple race groups. They've got 37%, 12%, who are the same people across 2000 to 2010 data. So Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders are also changing their response a lot. And overall, we found that 10%, approximately 10% of people in the whole census had changed either their race or their Hispanic origin answer between 2000 or 2010. So that's just a complexity to the data that even though we had 5.2 million American Indians racially in 2010, a whole bunch of people had said they were racially American Indian in 2000, didn't say it in 2010. So they can come back at any time, right? So when we're thinking about population growth, we have to keep in mind that there's these populations, these bigger sets of people. So Census Bureau projections, they fail. Oh, you can't, no, that just says 9.7 million for the 2020 population. So here's the, in the blue is the 2017 projection that they put out. Now it's before they knew what the 2020 population was. So they said in 2017, they thought the 2050 population would be 9.4 million. So then the 2020 actual blew that out of the water. And then in 2023, they quietly released a projection that said the 2060 population will be less than the 2020 population. I don't know what they're doing. So they made some strange choices, but I think the thing that's really driving their results is that they're not including the era of closure or the social construction of race or response change. There's lots of words for this, but they're just imagining that all of a sudden the American Indian population is only going to grow through birth and immigration. And they're not, since people don't immigrate and then call themselves while they're immigrating, they don't say, I'm American Indian. They're, they could be from Central or South American indigenous group, but they don't come in saying that. And so the immigration numbers are very low. The immigration numbers that the Census Bureau uses, the way that they do it. So their annual growth rate they came up with was 1.5%. And remember the previous, 70 years has been 4.6%. So to me, that just feels like, what are you doing? So I made some projections, doing my best to take complexity into account. Now, these are not published yet, R&R and tomography, but if you have, you can go ahead and tell me if I'm wrong. I will try not to cry. So here are the things, I'll go through these, but I did a cohort component model. So taking the population at the new time, I did it 5 years, not 1 year, but population at T+1 is the population at T plus the babies, but you only want the babies who will be reported as American Indian. Not all the babies are American Indian women, not all of them will be reported. Minus the deaths, adjusted for racial misclassification. I know you had Elizabeth Arias here recently, so she's the one who's taken the lead on that. And then plus or minus something, I don't know what to call it. Mental migration is one way to call it because I'm treating it like migration in the cohort component model. Or you could call it response change or the social construction of race, just acknowledging like we're not going to all of a sudden have a 30-year period with no growth. So starting population, I did go with the 2020 census, even though they did that weird coding thing, because we've never seen the population go down. And also they haven't told us how much their coding impacted the data. So if they were to tell us, then I would consider changing this, but we'll see. But they did estimate an undercount of American Indian people in the 2020 census. In their post-enumeration survey, it was 5.64% undercount on reservation lands on average, and almost 1% undercount off reservation lands. And so just adjusting the starting population based on where people were located, boosted up from 9.7 million to 9.7. So just a detail, but I think, you know, we have an estimate of undercount. We need to acknowledge that those people are actually there. Then we have the fertility question, which is a big question. Thankfully, Gwen's going to do her dissertation on American Indian fertility measurement stuff and solve all of our problems. But so I use the CDC fertility rates for non-Hispanic American Indian women. And for Hispanic American Indian women, I actually use the total Hispanic because we saw from the race response change that, or in those papers, found that hardly anyone who says Hispanic American Indian says it again when you ask them again. And so, but they do consistently say Hispanic. So I just wanted to catch these actual women's rates. So then there's this issue that only 22% of new American Indian parents using the ACS data are actually married to another American Indian. So in those marriages, you would think, okay, all those kids are going to be called American Indian. If both parents are called it. And when you look in the ACS, it's like 98%. So, okay, good. But what about the other 78% of marriages where you've got one American Indian parent? So I looked in the ACS and I found that, well, 70% for both fathers and mothers, 70% of the children, young baby children, were called American Indian. So then I made this crazy math. So for the 22% with two parents, I said, okay, great, that's the fertility rate. And then for the other 78% of families, I took 70% of the children, but both the father's children and the mother's children. So we're starting with the female fertility rate, but we don't want to leave out those children of fathers. I know you don't have time to check my math on the screen, but this I think is a new way of doing it, and hopefully is correct. And then there's mortality, the Smith classification adjustment. It turns out if you're American Indian and you die off the reservation, which most people do because most American Indian people don't live on reservation, then there's often the coroner or the funeral home director is just looking at you and saying, well, I think maybe you're Latino, maybe you're white, maybe, you know, like often they're getting it wrong. And so Elizabeth Arias and her team at the National Center for Health Statistics has done a bunch of linked data work where they've linked people's race when they're alive to their death certificates and calculated this adjustment. So I use the adjusted mortality rates calculated by them, and that actually reduces the population because if you think about it, if people are living as American Indian and dying as white, then no American Indians died and they just keep living, right? So that kind of fluffs up the life expectancy. So this cans it down. So this actually brings the fertility adjustment I did increases the population mortality decrease. Okay, and then how do you deal with this response change? I came up with two different ideas. One was to use the Census Bureau's expected and comparing it to the observed. So, and I did that for the 2010 and the 2020. They have that by details. And then I also did another way, which was using those that chart that I showed you where we have actual race response change rates, except for that's not a nationally representative sample. That's only people who could be linked. So I tried it these ways, but essentially calculating out a migration rate, even though the migration is to the category, the net migration. So people are, as I showed you, they're leaving the category as well, but what's the net migration rate? So this is what I got from those different ways of calculating mental migration, I guess we'll call it. So this, I did it separately by non-Hispanic and Hispanic. And the top line is the one from that huge linked non-representative sample. So I'm glad I also tried the expected versus observed, because that gave me a very different result. No, I'm wrong. Delete that. The top line is actually the 2017 expected versus 2020 enumerated. So there was that big jump, probably partly because of this recoding thing. The estimates and projections branch didn't expect the race branch to do that, so they had this big jump. I guess model A, the one with the linked data, is very similar to the expected versus observed 2010, which makes sense because they're both based on 2000 versus 2010. So I took the middle because if you look at the growth rate between censuses over time, it actually does kind of have this up and down. Like there's one decade that it's a 30% growth rate, next decade it's 80% growth rate. So I decided that we're taking the average of the expected versus observed would be a decent way to do it. So then, this is what I got. We got 9.7 million in 2020. Projecting a growth of about 4 million by 2030. And up to about 24 million in 2050. Overall, this gives us a 3% growth rate compared to recently it was 4.6. So it's double what the Census Bureau came up with, but it's still not as high as it's been. And I was talking to one of your colleagues who's an anthropologist this morning, and he said that the pre-Columbian total population, he's estimating it maybe about 24 million, so be back. I don't know. I think that was, I shouldn't quote him when he's not. But yeah, so that's what I came up with. And to me, this, it looks kind of outrageous, but also the other charts always, they look outrageous too. So this is just how it is, how it's been. And it also feels like, it seems very plausible that that we would get another 4 million in the next, by 2030. That feels good. Sure. Yeah, we've been going up. So we'll see what happens, but this is my attempt to take into account the complexities of the population, and I'm interested in your comments and feedback. Oh, I have one more slide. Look at that, I forgot. Okay, I did decompose that the population growth into a few different. So this is, we've got Hispanic, non-Hispanic, single race, multiple race. Those are the 4 colors. Then here we have people in tribal areas, adults and children. You can see that that this is dominated by non-Hispanic people, and that it's a much smaller. This is the population outside of tribal areas, so these are all kind of together. So outside of tribal areas, you have more of the Hispanic group, more of the multiple race group, and a much bigger population. And more children in, relatively speaking, in the tribal areas. So the 2000, 2010, and 2020 are enumerated and then expected. There you go. I'm interested in the conversation.
Well, and I will say that we usually take our first question from a graduate student. Anybody has one? Wendy?
Thank you, Carolyn. This was a great talk. I'm curious, can you go back to your fertility rates and explain this a little bit more? I was following with the needing to separate out the men and women because also, you know, we're just looking at the female fertility, we're cutting off all those men who are married to non-AIAN who have children who could also classify as AIAN. So I understood that part, but could you describe this a little bit more?
Well, it sounds like you understand all of it.
You had also included, sorry, you had separated it out, from my understanding, the non-Hispanic and Hispanic. I wasn't sure how you had done that.
For the, so I was doing the entire projection separately for Hispanic and non-Hispanic. This is just my example of the non-Hispanic side.
So you hadn't combined them.
I didn't know, I separated them out for the entire thing because Hispanic mortality rates, yeah, so I was, yeah. So for the non-Hispanic American, I don't remember what the percent for Hispanic American Indian parents reporting their kids as American Indian. I think I did that whole calculation separately.
And kind of jumping off that, are there gender differences in reporting AIAN ancestry that might come into play with the one parent example?
You know, I have been looking for gender differences my whole career because it always comes up in the reviewer comments and I've never, there just aren't. I mean, very, very similar in terms of rates of out marriage, in terms of rates of identifying their kids. I think it's, you know, I've heard that for Hispanic families and for Asian families, the last name thing really is part of the story. And we don't have that very much in American Indian communities. There are some distinctive last names, but oftentimes they're not. And so I think that might be part of why we don't see the differences that we see in other communities. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for this talk. I assume the largest component of growth will come from mental migration to.
I think so, yeah.
So I guess, so you're assuming that the rates of mental migration that you're estimating now will remain constant in the future? Is that?
That's what I built into the model.
So can you tell us a bit more of that assumption? Because one could think that the rates that you're observing now are some kind of catch-up effects with the past, and that perhaps there'll be some kind of a plateau in this mental migration rate or even a dilution of it. Can you tell us a bit more about how you think?
Yes, I think that's plausible, but it's also been what they've been saying ever since 1960. Every single census, they're like, where did these people come from? Surprise, you know, every time. And I think that they come from somewhere. And there was that long centuries of families that were told, don't identify as Native, kill the Indian, save the man. Like, we don't want you to identify as Native. So, you know, as I didn't see any way to logically say, well, it'll be higher this year and lower this other year, so just use the same rate for all three. And part of it, I guess that was feeding into my decision to use the average mental migration rate that was between 2000 to 2010 and then 2010 to 2020 to average it out, because at least it'll be, that's a longer period where it had a lower rate and then a higher rate. So I'm not thinking these are precise, but I think that they are at least more be more reasonable than totally leaving it out.
So I wonder, well, thank you for this great talk. Just adding to the question on gender, whether you found gender differences, I wonder if you find differences by the educational level, like we were talking this morning. I've done similar work for many the Brazilian context, but we saw that highly educated parents were more likely to classify their kids in a minority group than the low educated ones. I wonder if that would add some nuance to
Yeah,
your-
that would be interesting. I don't have the education. It's not in the main census. It's only in the American Community Survey. So I could calculate it and then I would not be able to apply it. But it is an interesting question. Yeah. One up front here.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. My question, well, first I had a quick follow-up about the question on gender and classification of the children. I was wondering, don't they now have some information, maybe it's not in the full census, maybe it's with the ACS, but don't they have an indicator of who's filling out the form that would let us know if women perhaps are more likely to classify?
I heard a rumor about that, that I would probably be the one to ask you.
Oh, I was gonna. I think you know what we're about.
Lynn knows, because she works for Lynn. Okay, yeah, it's definitely not on the list.
Yes. I don't know if it's on.
I think it might be part of the internal data on the ACS or something. I mean, there's definitely a rumor going around about it, but
Wait, that's doesn't come from the birth certificate. Did you get a number?
no, this comes from the birth certificate, yes. But if we're trying to analyze the birth certificate data only tells you the race of the mother, which does not tell you whether the mother thinks the child has that same race.
It has the race of the mother and the father, and I think they report the race of the child.
I don't think they do. Yeah, and the father.
Right. My other question was about Hispanic individuals being more likely to check the box for AIN or indigenous. That my understanding is that there has been some growth there in sort of the most recent decennial census, and that there were some efforts to encourage, like community groups encouraging Latino populations to identify as indigenous, and so maybe we could see that as a trend that might continue to grow.
Yes, it might. I mean, that's a big source is those groups encouraging a certain way of identifying. And another source is that as part of their change in coding, the Census Bureau expanded their list of Central and South American indigenous groups and looked for those indigenous groups in both the Hispanic answer and the race answer. And if you mentioned one, coded you as American. So that would say that this was a particularly big year. But we've had a really big year every other decade since the 1960s. Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you so much for your time. That slide with where the population hit 15. I want to pick up on Michelle's point that it just seems logical that there has to be some upward bound of how much this can continue to grow. So how much of this was also, every time I hear about this census reclassification of race, it's just mind-boggling that they emphasize that race is really subject to self-identification, but then they're forcibly recoding those.
I know,
It seems so counterintuitive. But I wonder if, so I was thinking that this was from 2010 to 2020. That's your last bar.
no, yeah, this was 2010 because they got rid of the ancestry question.
So, yeah,
So
it just seems
there's
logical that
enough
there
people
has
in
to be.
2010 to get up to 15,000, but you can see that from 2000 to 2010, we gained almost 5 million people who wrote some, put American Indian somewhere on the form. Yeah.
Continuing on London, have you been able to, or are you thinking about looking at these previous years of ancestry and linking it to later years to see how many that was identified in ancestry to then also identify?
I'd love to, but the link data I don't have access to unless I'm working with those particular Census Bureau employees who are now off on other projects. So. That, yeah.
It's interesting, but again, with these classifications, the way things are going, there are gonna be no white people. Then everybody is like, so I don't know if you try this, but is it possible to separate, the two parents, American Indian mix, like to present them more, not just, one race classification, but you actually, presents the mixture of the population or something, or
So you mean project the multiple race American Indian population separate from the single race American Indian population?
Yeah.
You know why I would not do that? Luckily, I have a slide. Right. It's because people are changing their answer between single race and multiple race. So you have the 7 million, 700,000, but then 87,000 reported white and American Indian in 2000 and just American Indian in 2020 or 2010. And where's the other way? Yeah, so they're just really moving around between the answer categories, and so I wouldn't feel comfortable projecting them as if they were a population because they're not the same people.
But you could still model those changes from single to multiple. I mean, that would be another type of mental migration that you're having already in your model. So, I mean, it would be complicated
Yeah.
because you still have to have fertility and mortality.
Yeah,
Oh, no,
I
so
think
they
I
are, but
have
that-
to. The fertility,
That's nuance,
So-
right?
To just be able to see how much of it is multiple race, single race, in your breaking it down by subcategories. Might be helpful. To just understand better that's.
right, because the multiple categories I have here at the end. They would nuance this picture a lot.
yeah, I know you follow, Alba has been saying this forever about the demographic illusion, about how these classifications actually exaggerate the disappearance of the white population, and so, picking up on that discussion, that table that you present is actually very interesting about these transitions. And I think that there could be some way to actually exploit that and see, who transits from one to one, who, like that. I mean, yeah, so that was the.
And Richard Alba has been arguing based on that transition matrix that that the white population will not actually increase because a lot of the people who are white and Hispanic or white and American Indian, they're also sometimes reporting themselves as just white. And so they're actually all part of the same population, and socially they might be, he's saying that they'll end up being just classified as white. So who knows if society is going to go in any direction. Yeah.
In that graph where you showed like the red and the blue and you were saying that those groups are different people, do you mind sharing like a couple of the different characteristics that you were able to look at?
The ancestry population versus the race population.
Yeah. Right here.
Well, the people who identify as American Indian race are much more who you think of, so they're more likely to be living on private lands, they're more likely to speak an American Indian language. The people who identify with just American Indian ancestry look very much like their race group. So if they're white with American Indian ancestry, their education and income and residence is very much like white people. A little bit different, like they're more likely to live than the rest of white people. But pretty much they look like their race group. And so if they're Black with American Indian ancestry, then they statistically look a lot like Black people.
Do you mean, I guess, with regards to education attainment, employment, like what are the specific things that, because I remember earlier you mentioned you didn't have the education access, so I'm just curious, like, yeah, what
Yeah,
information
I
do you
think,
have?
it was published quite a while ago now, but I looked at the basic variables that are in the American Community Survey, so education, and living on tribal lands or not. What else? Can't think of. I guess income is in there, so I think I looked at some measure of income. I mean, they're a little bit different. So people who are white and American Indian ancestry, they're not exactly the same as the rest of the white population. Yeah, you can see statistically a little bit of difference. A little bit less education, a little bit lower income. But quite just, more similar to white than to rich data. Which is surprising because there's so much response change. There's so much growth, like a lot of this population growth must be coming from the ancestry population. And so what? I don't know. Yeah, sounds a little bit harder. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm interested in kind of the application of the implications that your research suggests, especially as you think about public policy settings or research on stratification and inequality in general. And so I'm curious on one hand, kind of how you are conceptualizing the philosophical implications of that sorting that you start your presentation with. And then if you have any concrete advice for quantitative researchers who are kind of looking at these data and want to assess inequality for this group, right? But there are so many aspects affecting the identity that it's just difficult to pinpoint.
Yeah. Well, I think my general advice is to always present as many different subpopulations as you can and point out what you know about who they are and how they might be similar or different from each other. So that's why I present Hispanic and non-Hispanic, single race, multiple race separately, on tribal lands, off tribal lands separately. Because the people who are reporting single race and living on tribal lands are probably in that third set of the federally enrolled, or at least related to federally enrolled citizens. And so then that would be a group that you would want to develop policy around specifically. And so I can at least try to pull them out and present them separately, but also in context with the bigger picture that they're lots of enrolled people are not living on tribal lands, and lots of enrolled people are reporting multiple races. So you wouldn't want to exclude them. I want to keep them in my paper. I want to keep them on my chart. Talk about them, but and I guess that's related to, I just presented this actually in the Senate building, in the US Senate last week, which was surprising to, not this whole thing, I only presented 7 minutes about the projections, but I was like, it was part of a civil rights event. My health told me, well, we want you to come and talk about this in civil rights. And I thought, well, how is this related to civil rights? I don't know. But I think it is because if you think the population is shrinking, or you know, it's small and you can just ignore it, then you're gonna leave it out of your civil rights agenda. And so the fact that this is a growing and large population, and the fact that it has a lot of types of diversity, can help people who are working on civil rights to think about, you know, all of the people who are descendants of the original first people of the, you know, they've been impacted by colonization. And if, and so even if we're talking about indigenous groups from Central and South America, like, it's not like they didn't experience trauma, colonization, you know, all these terrible things. So I think we want to include a broad group when we think about who are we trying to serve, but also specific policies need to be for specific groups. So then we gotta get a, and just, you know, because the picture, picture is better than 1,000 words or something like that. You know, we can make our tables and charts to have a lot of detail that is kind of free for us. You know, we can keep that detail in there and not just present one.
Jumping off that comment, can you talk about the implications of this for tribal nations and tribal lands? Like, what do these projections mean for tribal groups and either funding or I don't know, other like legitimization?
Tribal nations are in a tough spot because the Census Bureau promises to work with them and create data that's usable for them, but then, you know, there's nobody able to hold the Census Bureau to that. And so they've, with the 2020 census and differential privacy, they've just, I don't know if you guys have heard about differential privacy, but they created they did the census complete with undercount, and then came up with the population total, and then added or subtracted a random number from that population total and said, here is your number. And then the tribes are just have to work with that, because what if they don't have nearly enough power to say, wait a minute, that's not what we think. That doesn't make sense. Like, we didn't shrink. We didn't double. Like, these numbers don't make any sense. So tribes really are in a tough position because a lot of them don't have the resources to do their own kind of census. And also, like, courts want to work with census data. Like, courts say, well, the census data is the official data. So when the Hopi tribes water rights case came through, and I was working on a related case, and the 2020 census data came out, and it said the differentially privatized Hopi data said that the Hopi population didn't grow. And the court said, well, if the Hopi population didn't grow between 2010 and 2020, it's never going to grow. You don't need any water. Gave them a very bad water rights amount based on the 2020 census data that was differentially privatized. So we don't know, plus the undercount. So I don't know, tribes are screwed. But it feels like a really bad situation for tribes. But at least I think this could show a tribe, like, there is reason to think that will grow, even though the overall census data is a problem. But, you know, births happen, and a lot of people who are tribal members would like to live on tribal lands if they could. So I would say it's more of a philosophical, you know, yes, I see you, yes, you're growing, even if the census is ridiculous.
We're at 1 o'clock, so we'll wrap up there. Thank you, Carolyn.
Oh. Nothing for your comments.